Hello and welcome, I'm Riz Khan. As we approach the end of 2024, let's look back at some of the remarkable guests and interview topics we covered since the Riz Khan Show launched at the start of the year. We've always tried to combine top news issues with human interest stories, relevant topics and inspiring people. And after more than 150 interviews in 12 months, there's a lot to remember. In July's half-year review show, I highlighted a cast that included Bill Gates, Norman Finkelstein, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Andrew Tate, Tyson Fury, Omid Djalili, and Stuart Copeland. And you gave us great feedback with your comments on the YouTube channel. Thank you. The second half of the year was still dominated by the two most visible conflicts in the news: Israel versus Hamas, and later Hezbollah in Lebanon, and of course the war between Russia and Ukraine. In a two-part end-of-the-year review show, we'll explore those pressing headline stories, as well as some of the lighter items we've covered. For this part one of the review show, there's a reminder that the eyes of the world were largely on the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, and the 10th US presidential election. Let's start in the Middle East. As Israel continued to unleash bombing campaigns against militia in Gaza and Lebanon, the civilian death toll ran high. We covered the story a number of times, offering, as always, perspectives from both sides. Israel's President Isaac Herzog put the blame for the lack of peace in the region squarely on the shoulders of Iran. For Israelis, do you think the first anniversary of October the 7th should be marked as a day of reflection and remembrance, or one of revenge and retaliation?
We are not dealing with revenge and retaliation. We are first dealing with a lot of pain and agony. I can tell you, as the head of state of Israel, I've seen enormous pain and agony that I've never imagined I would see in my life. I see enormous pain and agony of hostage families, of wounded people, of bereaving families, immense amount of bereaving families, of communities that have been displaced, and so forth and so on, all around the country. And the real issue is that we understand that there was a huge opportunity that was laid out originally by President Biden, actually, just before the war, of the connectivity of Israel all the way to India, through the Middle East, through Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and so forth, that would bring hope and a huge message of peace in the region. And this hope was derailed by this vicious, horrific attack of the Iranian proxies by Hamas in the south, Hezbollah in the north, the Houthis from Yemen, and proxies in Iraq and so forth. Now it's a big challenge, but if we change the equation and uproot this empire of evil and move forward to a better future of connectivity and peace in the region, this could be of historic magnitude.
You know, sir, after an attack that was clearly quite brutal, a year that began with Israel receiving almost universal sympathy and support from the international community seems to be ending with it being seen by many now as a global pariah. Now, isn't that a damning verdict on Israel's response to that attack?
We know that we are being attacked as part of the entire war machine against us, attacked in the international legal forums, attacked in public opinion, attacked on campuses and so forth. But we truly believe in our vision. We are a democracy. We are an oasis in the Middle East. We have Jews, Muslims, Christians, Druze and Circassians living and dwelling together. Unfortunately, yesterday, Hezbollah has attacked in missiles a bunch of Muslim towns and cities, our brothers and sisters, we are with them in this war. This is the real reality of the region. The real reality that we're offering the region is a reality of coexistence and living together, making, of course, peace agreements and surfing towards accommodating each other. We are all the children of Abraham, and I call upon the people of Lebanon, the people of Iran, the people of all of the oppressed nations in the region to rise up and understand that if we move this empire of evil, truly an empire of evil, if we confront it and be tough together, we surely can hope for a better future and create a NATO-like structure in the region that blocks radicalism and terror.
Well, sir, last week's missile attack by Iran on Israel caused relatively little damage. Is the retaliation worth provoking a wider war, global recession, further strikes on Israel?
So first of all, I can tell you as somebody who was in the shelter that it is extremely unpleasant, naturally. 181 missiles, big missiles on Israel. It's one can think it's one of the largest attacks in one shot on any country, and clearly deserves an answer. But we are considering our reply, and we are considering the next step of how to prevent and how to deter the Iranian war machine. And since I'm not part of this, it's not under my responsibility, I leave it up to the government and the military. And I think we are calculating all calculations in this respect. But one has to understand Iran is the only country in the world who calls for the eradication of another member state of the United Nations. That's Israel. And they keep on saying it all the time. I saw the speech of the supreme leader. There was no message of accommodation or extending a hand or saying, let's move together, and two great nations, historic nations, to move together and help change the life of people in the Middle East. Rather, you see Iran spending billions of dollars of their own citizens' money on a huge war machine, on other people's infrastructure, which are all aimed to create pain, havoc, rape, burn, take hostages, and chop and destroy. So either we offer hope or we go for destruction. Iran offers destruction, we are offering hope.
Well, Mr. President, as obviously a person in your position, could you confirm whether or not there would be a retaliation against Iran, and how soon?
I cannot go into any detail, of course. I think the words of Prime Minister Netanyahu were pretty clear. But having said that, we are, of course, looking on the grand picture and understanding all of the various calculations and interests, and yet it is clear to us that being attacked in such an aggressive manner and brutal manner needs retaliation and an answer that will deter our enemies.
Considering how you describe it, Mr. President, would Israel, or would you advocate Israel going as far as eliminating Iran's oil facilities, its nuclear sites, even its leaders?
I have no intention of responding to your question.
Okay, so
don't take it personally.
No, I understand. But has the U.S. given you any go-ahead for any attack on Iran, from what you know?
So we have an intense dialogue with the United States, our closest ally and friend. We have an open, frank, and friendly discussion with them on analyzing both the strategic issues as well as the various operational considerations on the ground. Today, the commander of CENTCOM, General Kurilla, is going to visit Israel, and I'm sure it's going to be the main topic of the day.
Israel's concerted military campaign included the assassination of key leaders of both Hamas and Hezbollah, including Hamas's key negotiator, Ismail Haniyeh, and Yahya Sinwar, who's reported to have masterminded the October 7th attacks last year. And Hezbollah lost its leader of 3 decades, Hassan Nasrallah, in an Israeli Air Force attack. Hamas's spokesperson, Dr. Bassem Naim, directly blamed Israel for blocking the prospect of any peace and the return of Israeli hostages held by Hamas. If the argument that Israel always throws out is that Hamas cannot be a partner in peace because it's got a stated goal of destroying Israel, surely if Hamas officially says we do not have that goal of the elimination of Israel, that would change the dynamic and the relationship in terms of trying to achieve a peace.
Again, what should Hamas do more than to declare its official goal in its political document 2017 by talking about the acceptance of Hamas of a common ground between all Palestinians, which means if we have the chance to have a Palestinian state, an independent, self-sovereign state, on 67 border with Jerusalem as a capital, preserving the right of return, that we will cooperate in this, we will be part of this. But again, on Gaza, you have Hamas, you have October 7th, you have the resistance. In the West Bank, you have the PLO leadership, you have the PA, the Palestinian National Authority. What is the situation on the other side? Annexation of the West Bank, Judaization of Jerusalem, more than 20,000 Palestinians killed between 2000 and 2023 on checkpoints in their own land, in their houses, burned by extremists. What is, again, on the other side, we have a Palestinian partner who is ready to go ahead for this solution.
So,
but what is the response from the Israeli side? Declaring...
no, sorry, Dr. Naim. I realize.
2017 or 18, he has declared... Yes.
No, sir, I know you've gone over those issues. I was really just looking to see if Hamas would officially make its position one which says we no longer look for the destruction of Israel, and then perhaps Israel has less of an argument against it. But let me ask you this. Did you believe that taking hostages would at least provide you more protection or, preserve the protection of the fighters against Israel's response? And perhaps that hasn't happened. The other thing is, obviously, there are families now arguing with the Israeli government for the return of their hostages. I spoke to one of them. They're desperate for news about the hostages. What information can you tell me about the condition of the remaining hostages after 1 year in captivity?
First of all, I want to reject this kind of arguments because it is part of the Israeli propaganda that we have captured Israelis in order to protect ourselves or our fighters. No, we have negotiated with the Israelis for years and years to get our freedom fighters, our heroes behind bars in Israeli jails, to get them free. Nael Barouthi is now for more than 44 years in jail. And like Nael, there are a lot of Palestinian leaders and fighters behind Israeli jails, but we have failed. And the international community have also failed to help Palestinians to get their prisoners free. Therefore, the main goal of capturing Israelis, I'm talking about soldiers, is how to get our prisoners free. We have offered from day one, after October 7th, to have a serious prisoner exchange to release all prisoners, all captured Israelis, and to get all our prisoners free. But Israel, from day one, has rejected all these proposals and have declared 3 goals: to crush Hamas, to evacuate Gaza Strip from its people, and to retrieve the captured Israelis forcefully. Therefore, we have also accepted at least 2-3 times different proposals from the mediators, and each time these proposals, which was accepted publicly and praised by the mediators and by the Americans, was sabotaged by Netanyahu and his racist government, either by committing new massacres or assassination of the top negotiator, or by adding a new condition like what he has did in the last negotiated deal in July 2nd. We are ready to go for implementing this negotiated deal, which, by the way, this negotiated deal of July 2nd, the core of this negotiated deal is an Israeli paper, which was adopted by Joe Biden, and we have welcomed this Joe Biden proposal. Then it has become the UN Security Council resolution, and we have also welcomed this. Therefore, we are ready to go immediately for solving the whole issue by going for implementation of this broker deal.
"15 months after the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel, the stalemate continues. For the Israeli public, the remaining hostages are a primary concern. I spoke with the brother of one of those hostages, Or Levy, whose wife Einav was fatally gunned down as they hid in a shelter after attending a music festival. Or was captured, and the Levy's 3-year-old son, Almog, is now in the care of his grandparents. Or's brother, Michael, campaigns full-time now for the hostages and updated me as we sat together when he visited Washington, D.C. Seeing that video of the attack on that shelter and Or's capture must have been pretty difficult, obviously. But you want the world to see that video. Why is that? Why do you want it to be so public?
It took us a while to decide we want to release it and to show it to the world. But the way I see it is that sometimes the world need a reminder. People need a reminder that there are actually live hostages in Gaza. And I know it's really easy to forget about them, but it's about them. It's not about politics or the war or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's about human beings.
It's very difficult to imagine what this last year would have been like for you. I mean, it's gone on way longer than most people could have imagined. And I'm wondering, emotionally, how trapped you feel in that moment because things haven't moved on after so long.
So I keep saying that people ask me, what are you going to do on October 7th? Or how do you intend to mention it? For me, it's just another day because I still live in October 7th, 2023. Things were stuck there for me. Everything feels like one long day.
Have you become a community with other family members of the hostages? I mean, how does that help you cope? Obviously, if you do get together, it's a support structure. How have you found that coming together?
That's actually one of the positive things that happened because of it. They became my family. I can talk to them. They understand me with no words sometimes. And it's helping.
And yet, the difficulty is that all of you, the families of those waiting, you've had to deal with news. Either you hope for news of release or you have the tragic news, as was the case with the bodies that were found.
Yeah, it's terrible. Sometimes when they are getting released, it's the happiest day you can imagine. And sometimes when we hear horrible news like the 6 that were executed, that's the most horrific news you can think of. So in a way, it's like an emotional roller coaster. But the amazing thing is that we stay together. Even the families that got the worst announcement stayed with us, and they keep fighting with us. And that's amazing to see.
Conflicts, they have tragedy on both sides quite often. And as you try to cope, and you and the families of the hostages try to cope with the situation on your side, how easy or difficult is it for you to see what's happening on the other side? That, the suffering obviously some of the Palestinians are going through, many Palestinians are going through.
I hate to see anyone suffer, and I keep saying it everywhere, that Hamas didn't just do it to us as Israelis. They did it to his own people. The Palestinians are suffering because of Hamas. And the fact that Hamas is still there means that everyone will keep suffering. And like I said, I hate to see anyone suffer. And I would love to live in peace together with Palestinians, if possible. And the only way to do it is to release the hostages, and this will end the war. And that's what I think that the world should do. Push towards this.
In Gaza, the Palestinian death toll crossed the 45,000 mark, and the UN reported that 70% of those verified killed in the first 6 months were women and children. In addition, aid agencies report more than 100,000 injured and desperate conditions for those seeking shelter in Gaza, where more than 3/4 of the buildings have been reduced to rubble by Israel's bombing campaign. It's now hard to find any Palestinian from Gaza who's not been directly affected by the death and destruction, and even those Palestinians living outside the Middle East. Soon after talking with Michael Levy about his hostage brother, I met with Dr. Tariq Haddad, a cardiologist living near Washington, D.C., who, at the time we met, was already mourning the loss of more than 175 members of his extended family. When you heard about the attack a year ago, then when did you then start to hear about what was happening to your family members, when the losses started from that?
Oh, it's within a few days. The attack started almost immediately, and I would say by mid-October, we were starting to see casualties in my family and deaths, and homes being destroyed, and and then they just really started to mount. And most of my family on my mom's side is in Khan Yunis. Most of my family on my father's side is in Gaza. So they were getting it on both sides. And it's at this point, we've almost lost track of how many deaths in my family. But it's been well over at this point 175 people in my family who've been killed. And it's just been a steady stream. It started in mid-October and it hasn't stopped since.
Dr. Hanad, one of the problems with discussing the numbers of people killed, the statistic, is that it starts to cloud what are the actual individual stories, the people, the human beings behind those numbers. And that's obviously now evident more so than ever with you and your story. So let's talk about the members of the families that you've lost. And I know it's a difficult conversation, but tell me about some of them. So, who they were and what happened.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, the past year has been a collective nightmare for my family. There's too many to list, and that's the sad part. But just some of the stories that come to mind, just dozens and dozens of children. There's an infant, Sabir, who died in December in the middle of the tents in Rafah after his house had been destroyed. And he died after his father had been killed, all of his siblings had been killed, and his mother had been killed. He was orphaned, and he died from hypothermia in the middle of December, a child who was literally a few days old. And he died from hypothermia, completely unnecessary, having had his home destroyed and all of his family destroyed. Another child from my mom's side of the family, Hamza, who, he and his parents and his uncle and aunt and his other uncle and his grandparents all lived in one home. One Israeli missile attack in Khan Yunis on October 25th killed 16 members of his family. Hamza was barely 10 years old, okay? And he survived. He's the only one of his family. He survived. He woke up in a hospital with an amputation and with the news that his parents, his uncle, his aunt, his other uncle, his grandparents, every single member of his family had been killed. And then he himself succumbed to the trauma from his amputation. I just wish I wish your listeners could understand what it would be like. Just take Palestinian or Israeli out of this and just imagine if you were a 10-year-old kid, every single member of your family has been killed, and you wake up in a hospital with an amputation for no reason. You're a child. Another family member of mine from my mother's side of the family, Toqa, who was killed on her wedding day. Imagine being killed on your wedding day. She was killed with 9 other members of her family on the day of her wedding. Another cousin of mine, Dan Al-Farra, who was killed while she was pregnant. Another was killed on the day she got her PhD while she was sheltering in Rafah. My first cousin from my father's side, Hani, was killed with his mother. He survived initially to find his mother buried from the waist up in the rubble of their home, dead, along with his brother. He managed to survive with a fairly minor leg injury and bled to death the next day because there was no hospitals near his home. In Gaza, every hospital had been destroyed. He died from a completely preventable wound. The stories go on, and they just continue month after month. Just recently in August, one of my cousins, Abdullah, was going to get bread for his family. His family was hungry. He just went in Khan Yunis just to wherever he could get bread. He had one bag of bread in each of his hands, and he was walking back to his home, and an Israeli missile hit him and killed him. And our last picture of him was him dead on the side of the road with a bag of bread in each hand. Just recently, about 4 or 5 days ago, another large segment of my mother's side of the family, 23 family members, all killed in a strike that was massive, absolutely destroyed. I think I provided you some video, but destroyed literally what looks like the equivalent of a New York City block. And it was 9 stories and numerous families all killed, 23 members of my family. So yeah, numbers don't really tell the story. It's all these human stories. These are all innocent people. These are all members of my family that either I know or my uncles or my aunts know. And sadly, I feel like one of the things as a Palestinian we've learned this year is how much we are dehumanized. We're not really looked at as people, just numbers. And I think their stories need to be heard.
Stories there of how the conflict between Israel and Hamas has directly touched the lives of people on both sides. Well, the news from the Middle East over the past 14 months has shifted some of the focus from a conflict that reaches its 3rd anniversary in February. That month, in 2022, Russian troops launched a military incursion into Ukraine, a country already partly annexed some years back under the orders of Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Few expected Ukraine to hold out for so long against Russia, but with support, sometimes on and off, from Western allies, Kyiv managed to largely thwart the Kremlin's invasion plans. Still, Moscow's push further into Ukraine has worried some of Russia's neighbors, especially as fears have risen that Vladimir Putin is now actively engaged in hybrid warfare, using cyber attacks, intense propaganda and disinformation, and even interfering in other countries' elections. The Baltic nations are particularly wary because they closely share shipping routes with Russia and have seen, among other things, damage to crucial underwater data cables connecting various countries in the region. I had a chance to speak candidly with Andris Spruds, the defense minister of NATO member country Latvia, about such concerns. There is a fear among some in the Baltic states and other former Soviet nations that Russia is trying to create a split within each country between those citizens of Russian origin and the rest of the population, and even among politicians who are pro-Russian or anti-Russian. What chance is there Russia could create that kind of division in your country?
Well, of course, Russia can attempt and try different kind of means and measures to split and to divide. And I think this has been part of the Russian hybrid activities, again, for years. Of course, we are a democratic country, which means that there is diversity of opinions, diversity of political parties as well. And we are proud of it, that we have this diversity. At the same time, on the fundamental issues, sovereignty, freedom, democracy, supporting Ukraine, there is no split in Latvian society. Yes, there is some legacy of the Soviet Empire. Unfortunately, there are some minority groups within society which sometimes seems to be still living in the past. It could be acknowledged, but absolute wide majority among Latvia's population, including Russian-speaking population, are loyal, patriotic, supportive of NATO, supportive of course, of being a member of European Union, and also supporting Ukraine.
European officials are investigating what they believe is sabotage of underwater cables in the Baltic Sea, including a connection between Lithuania and Sweden and Finland and Germany. What information are you getting about this issue and what's being described as a hybrid warfare being waged by Russia against the West? What can you do to avoid something similar affecting Latvia?
There is hybrid warfare in the region. Absolutely, this is without any doubt. And Russia wages this hybrid warfare activity. I would be a bit more careful exactly specifically on this incident, because still some investigation must be completed to make specific already the conclusions. But yes, we are partly facing those challenges of defending, protecting our critical infrastructure. It's not easy. Let's be again straightforward, because we see cables hundreds of kilometers, and you cannot keep the warship above every cable, every place. This is, of course, also understandable. But additional monitoring, additional cooperation among institutions, additional flag appearance, also showing the NATO presence in the region. Also, of course, additionally adding warships and patrolling. This, of course, has been done and must be done. And of course, additional monitoring is certainly the key response to this.
I presume that's in response to Britain's warning that Russia is preparing to use cyber attacks on critical infrastructure against European nations supporting Ukraine in this conflict.
You are absolutely right. We've been facing cyber attacks again for years. 3 Baltic countries, if you look at some specific cyber attacks, 30%, almost 1/3 of cyber attacks against European Union, they are targeting exactly three Baltic countries. So we already built a strong wall of resilience against cyber attacks, but it is an ongoing process. It is ongoing homework to improve our resilience, to improve our reaction time, to improve our, in a sense, the wall against any such kind of detrimental activities by Russia. And it should be put straightforwardly, by Russia first of all.
Russian Member of Parliament and popular TV host Yevgeny Popov joined the show once again to assess the situation from the Russian perspective. A key topic was the potential for the Russia-Ukraine conflict to escalate wider and turn nuclear. Popov suggested the option was there, but that the Kremlin was reluctant to take it further at this stage. Evgeny, good to have you back on the show. Now, following the recent developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, both the green light given to Ukraine to strike inside Russia and, of course, the Kremlin's response with the use of new hypersonic missiles, how much closer is the world to nuclear war?
I thank you for giving me a floor, and I don't think we are pretty close to the full-scale nuclear war, because it's many steps away in forward on stair of escalation, and we just going up on the stair step by step to the nuclear war. But I don't think that we have that there are much insane politics in Europe and in the United States, which want to be blown up in a nuclear war. And that's why I think we are closer to the negotiations than to the nuclear war.
I'll touch on that a little bit as the show goes on, but President Putin suggested the use of this new Oreshnik missile was a warning to the West. What do you think will happen if the West doesn't listen to this warning?
It's hard to say for me, because I'm not a guy from military Ministry of Defense, but I think it was important warning from Russia to any countries who thinks that we're not going to respond to the escalations. It was a signal to the West, to Washington, to London, to Paris, which is already using their missiles against historically Russian territory. It was hard signal, and I think it was it being heard in Western capitals. But I don't think that Ukraine and Washington will stop using the missiles again against our territory. But on every step which Washington or this lame duck administration will do, we have respond. But it's better for us to be on a table, on a table of negotiations rather than using new type of weapon.
Well, both the conflict in the Middle East and the Russia-Ukraine one featured in Donald Trump's presidential campaigning throughout 2024, with Mr. Trump claiming he could end the conflicts in a day. He'll have that opportunity after his inauguration on the 20th of January. This election was almost universally described as the most unique in American history for a number of reasons. I returned to Washington to interview some well-informed parties about the pending new political landscape in the USA. First of all, I caught up with Al Arabia's veteran correspondent and bureau chief in DC, Nadia Bilbassi, who secured an interview with Donald Trump just 2 weeks before the November 5th vote. Nadia has seen a number of presidents come and go, but even she was surprised by the events of 2024.
Riz, this is completely different than anything we have seen before for so many reasons. Number one, you have 3 months before the election and you have completely new candidate. We didn't go through the primary system. You know, we covered the primaries, but for a different candidate, which is President Biden. So it was very, very different in every sense of the word. We have a candidate who was a vice president, a woman, and the whole world probably was waiting to see if the US is going to elect the first a woman president and a woman from a minority, which is African and Asian origin. We also have a president who's been indicted, a former president who's been indicted. We had a former president who had been attempted assassination on his life twice. It was very strange in so many ways. And the polling was showing that they are so close to each other. So I never seen a percentage that close till almost hours before the results came out.
Yeah, how surprised were you by it being literally a landslide for Donald Trump?
I think it wasn't just me. I think President Trump was surprised too.
How's your relationship with him? Because you served as a correspondent here, as a bureau chief, during his first presidency, and of course you got to interview him recently.
True. When he was in the White House, I think he has a very combative relationship with the media in general. You have to admit that certain journalists were, they were seeking this kind of conflict, and we saw it on air, actually, on many networks. This is why he was very probably upset and angry of how the media in the US is treating him. For me, it was actually when people ask me, because I covered the White House since President Bush, we have more access during President Trump than any other president, which is very surprising. Why? Because he did not follow the system. The system is always being like, if there's a press conference, then the White House will pick and choose certain reporters to ask a president question, maybe 9 reporters out of 60 or 80. With him, he will open it and he goes like, anybody want to ask a question? We go to the Oval Office for what they call a pool spray, supposedly for 5 minutes. We can say for an hour. He will take every question because President Trump came from the media background. He understands the value of the media, and he also cannot stay away from being the headline in the media. So he always liked to generate news and make news, which is good news for journalists. But again, this relationship that he called the media the enemy of the people. Now, for me, I've been working with this interview for years, in fact. It happens in the last 6 months, when basically I called every connection that I know that will lead to him. And finally, I got a phone call from one of his closest advisors in April. And he told me, we're not doing interviews with the foreign media now, but I promise you, after Labor Day, we're gonna revisit this. And he said, I heard from so many people about you, so this is how it worked.
Experienced Republican Party advisor Adolfo Franco was Donald Trump's spokesman during the 2024 campaign. He believes a fundamental change in the mindset of Americans is why Mr. Trump had so much support at the ballot box. So what do you regard as the most significant aspect of what's become an historic comeback?
Well, I think the most significant aspect is that despite lawfare that was launched against President Trump, or persecution, political persecution against President Trump, doing everything to deny the American people the right to vote for President Trump, there was a realization, and it was a simple question that Ronald Reagan asked many, many years ago, and President Trump asked the same question. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And that is really the decisive reason that the president won the election. It has nothing to do with identity politics. It has nothing really to do with abortion. It has nothing to do with this idea of democracy and the rest of it. It was a question of the American people getting a right to see an agenda that really addresses their day-to-day needs. And that's why the president won.
I'll touch on some of the policies and the prospects in a moment, but I wonder, was this a generational vote, something that might realign support for the Republican Party for years to come?
Well, that's an excellent question, because there's a tendency in our studies of voters that when they vote a certain way initially in their lives, they tend to repeat that. It's a formation point. And the inroads that we made with young voters were remarkable in terms of what the president did. So now if the president delivers, which I think he will in the next 4 years, I think it is generational. I think it is a decisive moment for the Republican Party, and it is for this reason. It has broadened the Republican Party in a way that no other Republican in modern time has done.
So you referred to the Latino vote. Now, both the Arab American and the Latino votes seem to have played such a significant role in this election. What is it, do you think, that has encouraged these voters to switch their allegiance from the Democrats to the Republicans over the past 8 years?
Well, I think the Arab American vote is a little bit different. For example, in Dearborn, in Michigan, where there's a very large concentration, the largest of Arab Americans in the United States, 19% of Arab Americans voted for Jill Stein as an alternative. They weren't necessarily voting for President Trump. This, of course, has to do with the situation in Gaza and Israel, which is of great concern to many Arab Americans. So I think that is a little bit different. However, many Arab Americans as Latino voters, again, they're making the decisions. They're just like any other Americans. What I think has been a huge mistake for the Democratic Party, and it's been coming for many years, is what we call identity politics. And that is to silo voters to say, well, if you're a Latino, you need to vote on these particular issues. If you're Arab American, on these particular issues. At the end of the day, I think voters are looking at policies holistically. And that's what this election's results demonstrated.
I'll touch on that again in a moment, but I wonder, with a clean sweep of the presidency and both houses of Congress, effectively, Donald Trump has a very powerful mandate, almost a free hand to do what he wants to. He's got a mandate from the people now. How do you think he will use that? How can he use that power he now has?
Well, I think he will move very, very quickly, because most business gets done in the first 2 years of a presidency. I think he'll move very quickly in Congress to do tax and regulatory reforms, particularly extending the tax cuts, which is the domestic issue in this country, that are set. His tax policies that were set in place 10 years ago expire next year. That's the success that Biden has had as been a consequence, ironically, of the Trump policies of 2017, because they've been in place all of these years, but they're set to expire. That requires just a simple majority in Congress, which he will have. And I think that will be the number one congressional priority. On his executive powers, which he has broad executive powers, I think you'll see very swift action on the border, on border security with executive orders. There'll be a remain in Mexico policy, what we call a catch and release in this country of illegal immigrants will stop immediately, and you'll see those things happen quickly. You'll see a reversal on energy policy through regulation. You'll see actions on tariffs very, very swiftly as well. So when you see the president's first days, they will be a slew of executive orders reversing the previous administration's policies and setting in place new policies. He is I know him. He is extremely mindful of the need to deliver as quickly as possible for the American people on reducing inflation and getting crime and illegal immigration under control.
Considering the divisive nature between the parties, how much is the reversal of some policies from the Biden administration really a bit of kind of just revenge?
Well, I don't think it is revenge. I think there are significant differences on policy on the big issues in this country that have to do with, again, immigration, have to do with government spending, which I think he will rein in now with Elon Musk being tasked to look at the size of government. I don't think it will be a revenge. This was an election, and I think I agree with the Democrats on this, an election about the kind of country we envision and the kind of country we will be. And as a consequence of that, I don't think there'll be revengeful policies. They're just different perspectives of what the role of American government should be. And that he needs to deliver on very quickly.
A perspective there from a close confidant of President-elect Donald Trump. But not everyone sees such a positive side to a second Trump presidency, including another journalist who's covered the Washington, D.C. scene for a long time. Veteran former CNN White House correspondent and Washington bureau chief Frank Sesno now directs strategy at the George Washington School of Public Affairs. He expressed his concerns about Donald Trump's return to the White House. As an American, as well as a senior media figure, are you bracing yourself for a major difference in the way the US works both domestically and internationally?
Yes, I am bracing myself for a very substantial shift. And I think a shift that people haven't still been able to really fully apprehend. Because last time Trump came in, it was sort of surprising. And there were people who came with him from the traditional Republican Party, the gatekeepers, the guardrails. Those are all gone now. Trump knows where the levers of power are because he's had them. He's had 4 years to stew about it. And as he has made very, very clear in his public remarks, he does seek a degree of retribution and revenge. And the people who he's bringing with him, those who've already been nominated for some positions, have very strong, and some would say, would use the word extreme, positions on things. So I think it's going to be a fiercely anti-regulatory, nationalistic, if not isolationist government that's going to be ratcheting up trade war pressures and other things to assert this MAGA agenda that Donald Trump very clearly talked about and brings to office.
I spoke to one of his advisors, knows him well, who said he expects Donald Trump to tone down the rhetoric to a large degree, that things might be a bit calmer this time.
I have never seen Donald Trump tone down the rhetoric, and even if he does, there are people around him who don't want to or don't need to. Because now it's not about rhetoric. Now it's about power. They don't need to scream about it and cajole the party, whatever, and plenty of people voted for them and like them and want this. And I think we need to listen to that and understand what that means. But they know what they want to do. They've advertised this very clearly. And so it's not about rhetoric, it's about reality. It's not about speeches, it's about action.
What did this very divisive election teach you about the way Americans consume news?
Well, I think this very divisive election taught us a lot of things. First of all, I think it taught us that Americans are not very good at listening to other Americans. I think it taught us that the years of division and this notion that, well, if you just look at Donald Trump and understand what he's doing, you'll realize he's not qualified for office, has not been a message that has sold. And the role of traditional media has been eviscerated. The role of traditional media has been so weakened and so changed. Candidates don't need the media, traditional media. That's why Trump didn't do a second debate. It's why he sat for virtually no mainstream media interviews. And Harris did very little of that either. I mean, so they went through their influencers, their podcasters, their friendly interviewers to get to the niche audiences they wanted. Social media filled in a lot of the blanks. And the role of traditional news, of traditional media, which I know well from previous years, it still exists, but it's been marginalized.
With social media playing a much bigger role in everything nowadays, as you've indicated, what does it tell you about the way election coverage has evolved?
Election coverage has evolved to cover what you can and grab that piece of people's attention that you can get. Broadcast networks audiences are down. Cable news network audiences are down. The old print, legacy print media are down. Even the digital publications have struggled. Local and regional news organizations have laid off massive amounts of staff and lost circulation and clicks and viewing as people have gone to TikTok, to their other social media platforms, and to one another. And the big gains, the big winners here are the big podcasters. These people who have YouTube channels and podcasts that have, in some cases, millions of devoted listeners and viewers. That's a sea change. And those podcasters and YouTube channel stars, they don't play by the journalistic rules that you and I used to play by. It is not about accuracy above all else. They don't have producers and editors who are gatekeepers and who fact check them before they go on the air. So that level of media accountability has been whittled down.
So how should the media, at least the mainstream media, handle the return of a president who sees them as fake and as an enemy of the people?
The mainstream media confront a massive challenge now because they are going to be targeted again and probably more effectively and in a more sustained way than they were when Trump was in for the first time. He has famously or infamously called media journalists enemy of the people. So it's not merely an adversary in our constitutional system, it's an enemy in our culture. That is a very dramatic and very dangerous shift.
Well, we don't often get the chance to canvass public opinion, but we do want to hear your voice. So while in Washington, D.C., we stopped a few people near the Capitol building for their thoughts on which social and global issues the new Trump administration should prioritize. Using the popular social media grading system known as tiers, we got the thoughts of a rather diverse sample of people. So tell me where you've come in from.
Colombia and Austria.
All right, so now Donald Trump is going to be back in the White House. As people who are living overseas but might be affected by policies, what are you most worried about? What are you most happy about?
for me, I think it's gonna be a big change for all of us immigrants. It's gonna change the rules, and I hope everything gets better for us and for everyone too. I think the climate is a big point that is going to change because he's also with the white and black persons. He's not in touch that much, and he wants to America to be white again. And I don't like it so much because I think America is a land that everyone can come in and be a part of America. So I'm not a big fan of him. So yeah.
Well, let's do this. Let me get a board which has 5 of the key policies that they talked about during the election, and you can put the number just next to the ones you think is most important, which is the most important. There's only 5 of them. Let's try this. So look, we've got numbers are there. So border is, of course, immigration. Unity, they promised to get everyone back together again because the country was very divided. Ending wars, of course, Gaza and Russia, Ukraine. Climate, you mentioned, an economy for American people. So pick these numbers and just quickly push them into the board which you think is the most important. I guess you'll have to choose together.
I think economy will be the first.
Yeah.
Economy first, great.
So.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
So border immigration, unity is getting everyone together again after all the politics.
Yeah,
I think it's important
too.
right now because they are very divided right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think the climate is very important.
Yes.
So free.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want border.
Yeah. I think so too.
And 5.
And 5, yeah.
Any wars.
Any
Yeah.
wars.
All right, super. So tell me where you're from.
I'm from Egypt.
Welcome.
Yeah.
And
I'm from Kazakhstan.
welcome again. So listen, it's an interesting time post-election in the USA. A lot of people are wondering, how things are going to be in the next 4 years as Donald Trump becomes president again. What are your concerns? What are you happy about? What are you worried about?
Yeah, I'm happy about that. It's gonna be like less for like immigration, like the illegal immigration, and I think it's gonna be good for the economy. I mean, the day that Trump won the elections, the stocks went high and everything went very good, so, and crypto, and I have some crypto, so that's good for me.
And you?
I'm not good in politics stuff, but I believe that it will work for America very good, and not only for America. As I know, Trump has very good relationship with the Russian Federation, and it might stop the war in Ukraine, and I believe that everything happens for the good reason.
Well, during the election, they all talked about policies. And we have a board, we're creating a tier list. And we just want you to put the numbers next to the policies, the issues that you think are the most important. So it's 1 to 5. I'm going to bring this up to you. So guys, if you want to just take those numbers and put them in the order of which you think are most important.
Oh, all right.
So border, of course, is immigration and so on. Unity is getting the country back together again. Ending wars.
Ending wars.
Okay,
This
just put it here.
First thing for me.
Right.
Because I live close to Gaza in Egypt.
Oh, goodness,
So
of course.
Yeah.
Okay, the second, I guess, borders.
Borders.
Okay, there you go.
Well, I'll put economy before borders actually, but it's okay.
Okay. Joint agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess unity.
Okay.
So what do you mean by unity here?
Well, it's, the country got very divided here.
Divided,
And so people are, worried
hope
about
so.
it. And so then
So,
5 would be
climate.
Climate's coming in last.
Yeah, I mean, the weather's very nice today, so...
Oh, you're cheating. Hold this up and we'll just get a picture of you guys
good.
holding it. Thank you. A couple of quick questions. What's your general feeling on the way the vote went?
I think the way the vote went, it was mixed feelings. Really want the new administration to be successful in what they promised, things like economy, ending wars, things of that sort. If they can be successful, I think everyone will be happy at the end of it.
Do you think a new Trump administration is going to change things much, the way your life is, will it be affected?
I think so. Last time around, the economy was really good while he was president. At the end, it kind of suffered a little bit, but that everyone was in that boat together. But I think economy will be better.
Well, now Donald Trump is going to be back in the White House. What encourages you most and what scares you the most?
The encouragement part is he's now saying he's pro-legal immigration. So that's the encouraging part. He is going to turn around the economy. So that's also positive. The scary part is with which speed things are getting implemented. So it can be like, I just hope no rash decisions are taken. That would be something that I would look out for.
What's popular on social media is tier lists where different tier of priorities occur. So I'm going to show you a board that has 5 of the key policies that were referred to in the election. And I want to just get you to put numbers quickly against which you think are the most important of these. So Neil, if you would, could you bring it over and you can... Yeah.
So I think ending wars would be the first priority, considering that will drive a lot of other things as well. The economy can be better if there are no wars, etc. The number 2 would be economy, considering he is the most pro-bullish economy person in this race. The third, I would say, would be in unity. So
bringing the country together.
Yep, and that, like, while we are bringing up the economy, ending wars, like bringing all the people together would be definitely a good one. And then border, just cleaning, not in the sense that making sure things are done due the legal process. And finally, climate change.
And he said he's going to drill.
Yes. I mean, the one thing I really want is, like, we need to take a balance approach, not like either this or that way. Like, there is a balance that we can strike. Hopefully we can come up with that as part of this.
Sir, thank you so much.
Great.
So guys, tell me where you're from.
I'm originally from California, and then I moved Texas and Maryland.
California.
Okay, well, welcome to the East Coast. Let me ask you, the election's over now. Donald Trump's going back into the White House. People are wondering what's going to happen. What do you like, what you don't like about what might happen?
I think it's really an era of, like, uncertainty to try to figure out what's going to happen. I think just to read on people I've talked to, different sides, there's hopefulness, there's some sadness, and there's some joy. But I think really the big thing is people have their fingers crossed, and hopefully we can pull it together and actually just work together for our country instead of all this other stuff.
A lot of people worried about the country becoming so divided. This campaign probably more than ever before. Did this concern you?
No.
You weren't worried about the divisions?
Division's bad, and it's the worst I've seen in my life, and gone through a bunch of different presidents. I didn't think it was as bad as some people felt, maybe. Like, we just came back from Gettysburg, and having seen where America was at that time, when literally hundreds of thousands were dying, fighting the Civil War, we're not there. And so I thought it was a little overplayed that people would talk about it being there. But the division's just bad. There was a time when we used to be able to just disagree and move on with our lives and do what's best, the best we can. And it just seemed that we've lost that sense of what's right and what's wrong, and how to balance that, be able to just disagree and again move on and do good things.
So I'm going to ask you a favor. What's big on social media now is tiers, layers of, priorities. So I've got a board, and it's like five of the policies that were discussed, from unity of the country to border, immigration and so on, economy and so on. I just put a number by which one you think, in the order you think they're most important. Okay? So here, for example, which one would you make number 1, which to number 2, and so on?
I would say number 1 is definitely the economy. It always is. You can't feed your family. There's not much sense in talking about anything else. Number 2, me personally, and it kind of goes together with the economy, because the border, no nation can just keep a wide open border and you'll see this in Europe. I spent 2 months in Europe, and you see the same thing over there. They're struggling with that. So
number 2 by
I would definitely say number 2. Unity, just because if we don't get that piece together, that's got to be at least number 3. Number 4, war's never good.
And so climate comes in number 5.
And then, climate comes number 5, because if all the other pieces aren't in place before that, what's the point? Just make sure you get my good side.
So there you have a sample of the public voice. And that wraps up part 1 of our 2024 review show. In part 2, we'll revisit some interesting topics, like the sensitive debate over assisted dying, the worldwide danger of plastic pollution in oceans and rivers, and even the all-female Saudi psychedelic rock band making waves. Join us for those next time. For now, from me, Riz Khan, and the team, happy holidays and best wishes for the new year.